Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Trump has bombed Iran. Iran has just retaliated by um, sending some strikes towards a US base in Qatar. So it's all kicking off now. And who better to talk to about this than our very own Imam Tom Facchine? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How you doing, bro?
Unfortunately, yeah, I'm subhanAllah. I mean, glued to the phone, glued to the updates, and the unfolding events that are changing every 24 hours very, very quickly at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm in a hotel room right now in Istanbul. We had to have this call. You've become my de facto, US on the ground guy, boots on the ground guy when it comes to anything America related. So I guess my first question is, and we've been looking at fielding questions from brothers and sisters. The first question is, who's calling the shots?
That's the $1,000,000 question, and people aren't sure. If you pay careful attention to Trump's rhetoric, he always leaves himself a justification to do anything later. So, even the statements he's made in the last 48 to 72 hours, he has indicated both that this could be the end of everything, okay, and he now doubled down and furthered that sentiment, in his most recent communique on Truth Social, about Iran got it out of their system, whatever that's supposed to mean. But in the previous announcement, he indicated that if there are further attacks, then we have the right to respond with more attacks. So he does this thing where he, if it's almost manipulation, right? Rhetorical manipulation, where he leaves himself both options, and then he will choose later which one he wants to do. The real question, though, is according to what logic is he choosing which of those two options? It seems, and many people have indicated this, but we're not sure. Obviously, you and I don't have inside information. There's things that only so much that we can know. But it seems that Trump is trying to send a message to Israel similar to the message that he sent in early January before the first ceasefire deal, which is that it's time to wrap it up. Now, one could wonder why he did it in the way he did it. There's several things he's trying to balance. He both attempts to grandstand and make himself seem like the alpha male in the room, but he also is shrewd enough to understand that other people need to do their own grandstanding, which is why he allows certain missile strikes like the one that was mostly theatric and symbolic at this point by Iran on the al-Udeid military base. Symbolically, yes, the largest base in the region, but it was emptied. The U.S. had forewarning. Qatar had forewarning. There was no risk of any military personnel or anything like that being even injured. All but one of the missiles was intercepted, right? So it was very performative, but that is also part of calculation with this political and military theater, that Trump is smart enough to realize that Iran can't do nothing, right? And so it's not necessarily a situation where if Iran even so much as lifts a finger against a U.S. asset, then we're going full-scale involvement. Trump realizes that's not true, that Iran has to posture just like Trump has to posture, Netanyahu has to posture, everybody has to posture to their own populations. And Trump uses that against people when he wants to. He has humiliated the Arab regimes, the Sunni Arab regimes, because he knows that. But he also allows for it when he wants to. Now, the ultimate question of, again, like who's really steering who here, it seems, and we don't know, is Musk right? Is Netanyahu just blackmailing Trump because he's been to Epstein Island and he's on the list and he's got all this incriminating stuff against him? That's possible, right? But it seems like Trump is trying to wrap it up, and he's trying to both give an off-ramp to Israel and to Iran. Now people are talking about negotiations. That there's a sense that it's not going to be beneficial. Of course, Israel was starting to panic, right? And I think that if you were paying attention to Israeli media, you could sense the panic set in when they're like, Trump says 2 weeks. They're like, 2 weeks? What the heck? 2 weeks what? Like, what? We're not going to be here in 2 weeks, or at least we're going to be heavily, compromised in 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks to wait. They're starting to set in some real anxiety and nervousness about Trump's commitment to come to the aid and to the rescue of the U.S. in a way that was more hands-on. And so this is almost like an invitation for... Yes, to Israel. Thank you. So this is an invitation almost to all parties to, hey, let's wrap it up and get back to a ceasefire or at least a relative status quo situation. The question is, Netanyahu has demonstrated levels of megalomania and hubris that run against this. What's fascinating to me, and this is one of the indications why I think it seems like Trump's just a little bit more in control, or at least trying to assert his control in this situation or calling the shots. That if you remember about, maybe five days ago, when they were floating, Netanyahu and some of the Israeli ministers were floating the possibility of assassinating the supreme leader of Iran. And then Netanyahu appeared to walk back those statements a little bit. And there's several reasons that this could have been done, where he distanced himself from some of the other ministers and he re-emphasized, no, this is about the nuclear issue. This is about the nuclear program. First of all, because it looks really bad and criminal and lawless, if you're going to just be going around the world assassinating world leaders. Now, Israel is arrogant enough and their leaders are arrogant enough to do that and to brag about it. And they have done it and they have bragged about it. However, even Netanyahu realized that, okay, it might be more useful in this particular political moment to at least stress the ridiculous, hypocritical double standard of this ghost nuclear weapons program, which probably doesn't exist yet, though it might have emboldened Iran to go that route in the future, that Israel is itself guilty of having a secret nuclear armament. But the fact that he chose to focus on that rather than stressing the regime change and the assassination of the supreme leader might indicate that, again, Trump is basically saying there's no way we can sell regime change, and people aren't. And you could tell by even the conservative media's reaction through podcasts and the news in the United States, a lot of mixed messaging. We've never been so war weary, I think, as a country since 9/11 took place. You see opposition coming out from all sides of the aisle, from progressives and people like Bernie Sanders to Marjorie Taylor Greene, people that you would never expect to be on the same side of an issue, speaking up very strongly against the prospect of another forever war in the Middle East. And so it seems as if that this is a signal to Netanyahu as it is to Iran. It's like, okay, let's cut it out. Let's find an off-ramp and finish this thing up. Let's
face.
Where everybody can save face. The question is Netanyahu too arrogant for it? Because Netanyahu is potentially arrogant enough to push his luck again and again and again, and this might be not just his own undoing, but it probably will end up being the undoing of Israel as an entire idea and project of a Jewish supremacist settler colonial apartheid state. The absolute arrogance and refusal to accept less than the maximalist position on everything. If Netanyahu doesn't stand down, that will be very, very interesting to see. It would justify further Iranian strikes, which I don't think Israel really is built with either the political will or even the military capacity to handle long term. So it'll be very interesting. I think that's the wild card that we're waiting to see now. Does Netanyahu accept this off ramp, or does he push for more?
I mean, also the rhetoric about regime change, it kind of makes your opponent feel like they're cornered, and that's when they'll fight to the death, fight tooth and claw.
It also shores up any dissidence and division that was internal to Iran, because Iran is a complex society with a lot of different. Israel was trying to fund the Kurds in the northwest, and they're trying to fund the opposition, and they tried to bomb one of the prisons that has political prisoners in order to release more people within the political opposition. But the best gift that you could we lived this under George Bush. The best gift that you could give an incumbent political leader is a genuine attack on their nation that they're going to rally behind, even if they have deep differences about their visions for how society should be run. They're going to realize that Israel poses an existential threat to Iran, not just about regime change. So that's part of it as well.
You mentioned a phrase. You mentioned that Trump humiliated the Arab regimes, the Sunni Arab regimes. How so? Can you expand on that a bit?
Trump knows that the things that the Arab Sunni dictators, and call them what they are, fear most is uprising at home. MBS, MBZ, that's why their true enemy in their minds is not Israel. It is political Islam, Muslim Brotherhood like organizations, all their offshoots. Anybody who is going to speak the Islamic vernacular of the masses, the Islamic idiom of the masses, and present an alternative Islamic future for those societies that is going to challenge and eventually usurp the power of the garrison states that they have set themselves up as. So, and Sami Hamdi has talked about this a lot. I don't want to necessarily just repeat things, but when Trump and his advisors
You
and his
mentioned they
cabinet
paid
members,
jizya.
exactly, that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's they paid jizya for nothing in return, essentially. Like like Sami has described it as someone who is a professional political analyst. Sami keeps better track of who's going where and who they're meeting with and all this stuff. So I'm not going to just repeat everything that he said. But Trump's team was surprised at the lack of will to negotiate something serious for Gaza and Palestine in the Arab nations. Jordan,
Wow.
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, etc. The usual suspects. But even Morocco, even Algeria, even some of the other nations that, they realize that for, again, grandstanding and saving face for your population, they realize that they can't come out and push it too far. That if they do that, they'll end up as another Anwar Sadat or type situation. And MBS has explicitly mentioned that particular moment in history as something that it lives rent-free in all of their heads. But the fact that they are not even willing to negotiate, that they gave up so much for so little, demonstrates, it's a humiliation. It's a humiliation, absolutely. And Trump went along with it. Of course, if you're any businessman, okay, and Trump at the end of the day is a businessman. He's not an ideologue. He goes with the wind and he goes with the deal. And he steps into the Middle East, either by proxy or directly. And before he even names his price, people are throwing prices at him that are far more than he would have maybe even asked for. You shut your mouth and you take it, right? That's essentially what happened. So this is what we mean in humiliation. And I use souk bazaar illustrations and metaphors a lot to try to understand or try to make people understand, average Muslims, about politics. You have to treat politics like the bazaar. You have to be able to negotiate. If you walk up to a table and you say, I'm desperate, I have nowhere else to go, and I'm in a hurry, you're going to pay the absolute most price that you could for a particular item. If you're able to shop around and say, well, no, actually, I prefer what this other vendor has over here, this other table over here, when you walk away, that's when you're able to negotiate. There was no such negotiation from the Arab regimes. They were so happy just to be visited and paid any mind that they lavished, what I call biryani diplomacy onto the Trump regime. Maybe there will be a couple of latent benefits here and there, but it really was a failure to negotiate. And that's what we mean when we say that it's humiliating.
So what I'm really interested in is seeing, so from afar we see, okay, there's some kind of tension between Trump, his actions the last few days, and the kind of America First, MAGA, kind of conservative, anti-foreign intervention camp that put their kind of support behind him, and they felt kind of betrayed by him. What are they saying now? What's the mood there? Are they interpreting it? Things like perhaps you described that, okay, this is maybe Trump being shrewd and he's actually really is, America first, or is he just a sellout? He's in Israel's pocket or whatever.
Oh, no, they're very betrayed.
Now?
They're very betrayed. And this is another indication. Actually, I believe Candace Owens is live right now as of the time of this recording, and she's absolutely blasting the blatant corruption of the United States political system. And she's been calling a lot of attention to the corruption and the ways in which the United States political system is completely bought and paid for by Israel and Israeli interests. And so that's the interesting thing. Trump, again, is not an ideologue. He is not a man on a mission. He is a traumatized, hurt person, if you go into his personal life, who is extremely just transactional. He's extremely transactional, and he's got a huge ego. He's not really an America First guy. MAGA is a slogan for him. It's a way to ride into office. It's a way for whatever his personal ambitions are. He's not a true believer I think. Even though you could say that he has done some stuff, over the entire course of his career in that direction. But the thing that you can't control is that if you start a movement, there are lots of people who are true believers of that position. And we have an interesting situation now where the true believers of that position and that ideology have now been betrayed by the figurehead and the symbol of that movement. And they are looking to, let's put it this way, it's going to go in a couple different directions. I think that it's tremendously positive. I think that there's an enormous shift happening on the ground in the constituencies of the United States when it comes to politics. If you had said even a year ago that the Muslims have no allies outside of the left, that would be the majority position, even perhaps unanimous position. You can't say that anymore. You can't say that after Tucker Carlson hands it to Ted Cruz in front of millions of people. You can't say it with seeing Ian Carroll and Candace Owens and Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and other people that are part of the right, whatever, influencer sphere, whatever you want to call it, be so consistently principled about this particular issue. Throw away all their stances that you disagree with on other issues. Let's just take this particular issue. That the size of the shift that we're seeing on the right is really dramatic, and it's important. The fact that they feel betrayed by Trump and disillusioned with the country's leadership, regardless of party, which is the language a lot of them are saying. There's now the language coming through is that both parties are corrupt. Both parties are dominated by Israeli interests. Both parties are bought. That is a tremendously positive development in the political discourse of this country, if only for the fact that the right historically over the last 30, 40, 50, maybe probably even 60 years, the right has been more capable, more able to create effective changes within the party system than the left. Because you have people on the left, such as progressives and radicals, Marxists and socialists, that kind of just don't believe in the system. And so there are people that don't vote and they don't want to vote and they think it's all, whatever. It's not as radical as strikes and et cetera. So you have that. On the right, we've seen within living memory the Tea Party movement. We've seen within living memory movements that changed the face of the Republican Party, such that it's actually unpopular right now to be a neocon. Could we imagine a similar, the Democratic establishment has successfully outmaneuvered the entire spectrum of the left when it comes to their constituency through cynicism, through horrible underhanded tactics, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the undermining of Bernie Sanders, all of these things, right? It's well documented. But the Republican Party has actually shifted further when it comes to what it's willing to endorse when it comes to the Tea Party movement and the Tea Party movement leading up to Trump and the MAGA agenda. So there seems to be more of an ability for the constituency on the right to affect changes in the establishment of the Republican Party. That's just one thing that is actually tremendously hopeful, because we might see a lot more Thomas Masseys in the future. We might see a lot more people that are willing to adopt a cynicism or a skepticism towards the Israeli first model. People are coining names and terminology for that. They're calling this out as Israeli first. Thomas Massey is a politician. He's a representative from Kentucky, and he is very, very anti-AIPAC and anti-Israeli supremacy, and he's been targeted by AIPAC a lot, and he's been very, very principled on Palestine and Gaza. Again, you can disagree with him on a million issues, but it would be unfair and not true to say that he hasn't been consistent and a person of principle. So these types of cosmic shifts that are happening, they are tremendously I think they're tremendously hopeful. I think that they show that again, Israel's in the hardest spot here, not Palestine. Despite the acute nature of obviously the occupation, the genocide that's ongoing in Gaza, the horrible, unspeakable things that are being done every day to men, women, children, everybody in Gaza that we see on our phones constantly, Israel knows that its time is drawing to a close. I believe that that's true. I believe that's almost the opposite thing pushing Netanyahu, that in addition to his hubris, it's a push-pull factor, in addition to his hubris and his arrogance, right, that public opinion has been ripped from underneath Israel so quickly and so dramatically, and it seems to be accelerating. That the more that these things
And the
happen, the
younger
more,
you are,
of course, there's
the younger
the
you are, the
generation.
less likely you are to support Israel.
Absolutely. So the time is on the clock, right? People our age and younger, they get their news from social media channels. We don't even watch the legacy media, their corporate media anymore. So BBC's horrible bias, which is confirmed and a matter of fact, and also with Fox News and CNN, which sounds now like a neoconservative station, right? Even the New York Times, which someone, I think, Candace Owens called the New York Times a propaganda arm of the CIA, and all these things. They're not credible. There used to be 15 years ago, 20 years ago, these institutions were credible in the face of people. They have been so discredited among so many people that only Allah knows the types of shifts that this will result in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But it's essential to any major social movement. The part of creating a societal level change in attitudes and sentiments, whether for positive or for negative, for good or for bad, whether it comes to ideas and conceptions of sexuality and gender or race and segregation. You have to have massive tidal wave shifts in the way that people understand certain issues and dynamics, and that is happening right now on the ground, and that's actually something I think that we have to look forward to. So the fact that they feel betrayed by Trump is extremely important. Where they go from here and how that will crystallize and manifest itself going forward will be an extremely important consideration.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I just need a few seconds of your time to tell you about our new campaigns that require your attention. Become one of 1,000 guardians who will defend the Ummah, safeguard minds, strengthen faith, and uphold the truth through our new transformative campaigns. Number 1, Palestine Truth. Exposing lies, amplifying Palestine voices, and countering false Zionist narratives. Number 2, Guarding Innocence. Countering godless ideologies, ensuring our children grow up proud of their faith, values, and identity. Number 3, Power of a Muslim Woman. Opposing individualism, avid materialism, and social decay by showcasing our homemakers and mothers as the true builders of civilization. And number 4, Hold On. Saving lives by providing support for those battling hopelessness and suicidal thoughts. For just £10 a month, you will be part of a mission that aims to impact 500 million lives, inshallah. Do not miss out on the huge reward. Click the link in the description below and donate.
Have the neocons been celebrating with Trump attacking Iran, and do you think there's a sense of emboldenment in their camp, or not?
I think that the outcry from so many places, and really in an unprecedented and bipartisan way, and in a popular way, has the neocons a little bit spooked. I think that that's true. I don't see the neocons as having a tremendously celebratory stance. Now, what's interesting is that the ones that are celebrating the hardest, they're the ones that are the most bought by Israel, such as Randy Fine, the representative from Florida, who has said some of the most belligerent, off-the-wall, out-of-pocket things. He's talked about nuking Gaza and doing all crazy things. Look through the comments. Look through the comments of the YouTube and Instagram or whatever, and you will see that people are like, this guy is so bought and paid for. People see through it. And so even if there are a few that are just totally Israel first, and they're able to parrot that today, and they're able to gloat because whatever, they think that they did something vis-a-vis Iran, that their time too seems to be limited, that people are seeing through this very easily, and people are very fed up with it. And it's up to people to do the proper steps of organization and political work in order to create then change. But these things happen where we see tremendous shifts, and we wonder what happened. In 1 year, we will be in midterm elections. Who knows what we're going to see in the midterm elections? It very well could be that the 2025 that was dominated by Israel first agenda might be the inconvenient major factor when it comes to shaping both who's going to be on the ballot on the Republican side of a ticket or on the Democratic side of a ticket.
So presumably now is the time to affect change when it comes to that, those decisions, right? For
I think that these are the
Muslims.
times that present the most opportunity. Absolutely, that when these shifts and fissures take place, when the categories are scrambled, that's when you have the most opportunity to make change. And I was telling somebody about this earlier, about how one of the worst things that could happen is if all of this gets subsumed yet again into the culture war between left and right. Most of America is not left or right. Most of America, I myself, I'm registered as an independent. The plurality of people in America are registered as independents. People have called it the silent majority, this or that or the third, but they haven't had any one particular issue or galvanizing force to organize them as a legible or recognizable entity. It has always been Republican, Democrat, left and right, and that's the public imaginary that people have. That imaginary makes less and less sense when the Israel first agenda is being pushed and the United States is willing to bomb a nation and subvert potentially the entire international legal order and its credibility and make the Americans less safe. Are we able to transcend this typical way of understanding it to repackage and recategorize society in a way that is going to aid to the power of this movement and create a real change?
And similar to that is the very question of the existence or the persistence of Israel as an idea, right? Something like 100,000 people have already fled, gone back to their homes, really. In London,
They're
New York,
saying it.
Berlin, Paris.
They're saying it's an event. They're on
Yeah,
TikTok. They're being recorded, being interviewed, saying we have to go home now. They're saying home, and people are watching this. Republicans in Missouri are watching this and saying, well, I guess you didn't really belong there in the first place if you're going home now to New York or to Cyprus or to wherever it is. So this is, again, like somebody said early on in the genocide, this round of the genocide, all you have to do to end Zionism is give Zionists a microphone. And that everything that comes out of their mouths, you see how people are acting in the shelters where the Ashkenazi are pushing out the Arabs and pushing out the Sephardim and pushing out the other Jews, and there's racism, and people are acting like selfish. And compare that to the messages that people have observed from the people of Gaza undergoing the genocide. It's night and day. It's night and day. The amount of pettiness and selfishness and tribalism and just cynicism that exists within Israeli society. Israel is sick. It's a disgusting entity. It's a disgusting place, and it has nothing to do with Judaism. It's only because of its Jewish supremacist, fake Jewish, supremacist logic, and people are catching on. In a globalized digital world, Israel can try to prohibit journalists from entering in, which they have done, and you have to have state approval and military approval to say anything. They prohibit people from coming in, from recording this, from doing that. People are catching on. There's only so long that you're going to be able to hide. And people are, once they realize what is the reality of Israel, that it is not going to be sustainable or tenable as a political project.
I mean, Muslims in even al-Quds, Palestinians in Jerusalem, they're offered millions and millions of dollars, to sell their properties, small, tiny houses, flats, apartments, to these international Zionist organizations, and they refuse. Whereas, the first sign of any heat or trouble, the colonial settlers are on the RAF flight back to the UK, as was announced today, 10,000 people being repatriated to the UK, or whatever, a few tens of thousands of people before. You mentioned Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson. I remember waking up in an alternate universe where right wingers are now holding politicians to account and putting their feet to the fire. He was saying, God says in the Bible, support the nation of Israel. And I was just thinking that the Palestinians that are there are probably definitely far more likely to be the descendants of those people in the first place than these European and Germanic and Russian converts. Even Vladimir Putin, in his statements to Iran, was saying, and Israel saying, we're not going to get involved in this one because Israelis, like 1 million of them speak Russian. Israel is like a partly Russian country, right? And people are watching this. And what was your reaction to this Ted Cruz and talking about this, giving his showing some of his usul al-tafsir from the Bible.
It was extremely important because of how foolish and ridiculous he looked. Honestly, it was a fet. It was a major conquest when it comes to just exposing the falsehood upon which Christian support for the Zionist project is based, and more Christians are waking up to having been deceived along these lines. And it was tremendous to see it happen in that idiom. The United States is predominantly a Christian country still, and that is the ethos of the land. However, as anybody knows, the way in which one particular religion is lived and understood, that's contested territory. So those things are shifting, and there are schools of thought and there are movements, and they battle it out, for arguing against each other to try to gain a foothold in how the religion is going to be understood and practiced. And so this, I will say, bastardization of Christianity, which is founded on very elementary level flaws in understanding the Bible within its own idiom and within its own context, that have been politicized and weaponized specifically by the nation Israel, behind their choice of the word, of the name for their nation, and behind their whole national mythos. As you just said, they're Europeans. They're Europeans. They all changed their last names. They created a language that's fake. Israel is a fake country. It's a fake democracy, which is another clip of when Tucker Carlson and Matt Walsh are saying it doesn't even exist now. Like in a certain manner of speaking, Israel doesn't even exist now. The United States props it up. It can't survive without the United States. It doesn't exist. Israel does not really exist in any independent, autonomous way, right? So, Milikowski, right? Whatever the last name, the actual birth name of Netanyahu, all these guys are fake. They're all fake, right? So, to have the ideology or the theology and the fakeness, the sheer fakeness of the theology put on display in front of so many Christians, and to have the ethnic forgeries, right, and the false claims to the land also, and the false sense of cultural belonging and appropriation put on, it's all there together. It's just all highlighting the fakeness of the Israeli project and the fakeness and the inauthenticity of Israeli society and the whole Zionist project. And again, demonstrating, I think, its frailty fundamentally, why it has to resort to such violent means in order to perpetuate itself, but also how it's doomed to fail.
So just before we finish, I know we need to wrap up soon. There's only one type of person or one country that has actually bombed using a nuclear weapon, cities in human history, when it comes to such such use of an indiscriminate force and violence. What is it about? Because this whole the pretext has been obviously about nukes and nuclear weapons and so forth. What is it about the modern Western kind of society that lends itself towards this behavior? Because obviously your background, you're an intellectual kind of historian, I guess, as well in your spare time. What is it about our societies today that, this something like a nuclear weapon is unthinkable in many cultures and many civilizations? What is it about the West that allows this to exist?
There's a few threads there, and I'm glad that you asked this question in the timing of this interview, because it's perfectly continues the answer from the last question, that Christianity is contested ground, and it always has been. Every discursive tradition, even Islam and Judaism, they all have histories in how they're understood and how they're practiced. And sometimes you have major movements or major schools of thought that combat and do ideological warfare with other rival traditions within that larger faith community. And this is ubiquitous. It happens to everybody. And so this is not a condemnation of Christianity in its entirety or of Christians individually, but the mainstream dominant strand that imposed itself in medieval European Christianity. There were several different types of Christianity that were battling it out, and the one that won out was a very, very intolerant form of Christianity, to the point where, and Professor Wa'il Halak brought this up actually in a recent meeting I had with him, when the first Christian colonizers, we're talking like the Spanish and the Portuguese, go to the Western Hemisphere and they go to the quote-unquote New World, they actually have to have a debate, a theological debate. Do these people have souls or not? Right? Do the natives have souls? And one side is saying, yes, they have souls, and therefore we should convert them. And the other side saying, no, they don't have souls, which is why we should just kill them. Right? That this is not necessarily something that is essential, again, to Christianity or the Bible, or to, definitely far from the teachings of Jesus himself. But this is indicative, this is illustrative, right? Symbolic of the type of Christianity that won out. The type of Christianity that only saw difference as a threat. The type of Christianity that resulted in a political ideology that did not accept any religious diversity within one political territory. I can't speak Latin, or else I would quote for you the name of the doctrine, but translated into English, it means whose realm, his religion. That this was the way that Europe was ruled for hundreds of years, that if your political leader was a Lutheran after the Protestant Reformation, everybody in the territory had to be Lutheran. If the political leader was a Catholic, everybody in the territory had to be Catholic. If not, you were forcibly converted, or you were killed, or you were forced to leave. Okay? This is why, rather than a existential struggle between Islam and Christianity, we actually see the Protestant groups and the non-aligned groups, like the non-Catholic groups, making alliances with the Ottoman Empire, like such as the UK after the establishment of the Anglican Church, and the German Lutheran states, and some of the Christian movements, the Protestant movements in today's Hungary and Eastern Europe, actually asking the Ottoman Empire to get involved and to come and lay siege to Vienna on their behalf in order to preserve religious plurality, religious tolerance. Because from the beginning, Islam practiced tolerance of difference, as opposed to seeing difference as threat. You can also see the same logic and mentality in the attitude towards science, but we won't go there because we're running out of time. That Christianity, the type of Christianity that won out, saw all these things as threats, and threats must be eliminated. Threats can only be eliminated. Traditionally, Islamic society, for the vast majority of our history, has been one that accommodated difference and allowed it to have a certain degree of autonomy and independence. And that's just historical fact. Nobody can argue, despite any lies that are spread out there, nobody can argue that. When that form of Christianity was finally overthrown, okay, that trace of that attitude remained, but then it got even worse. And how did it get even worse? Because it converted to a secular ideology of nationalism that was divorced of even the guardrails that Christianity had in place. So even if you were fighting or talking about the guardrails of Christianity, someone could come and point to the Beatitudes. Somebody could come and point to the Sermon on the Mount. Someone could come and point to the gospel and say, this is not Christ-like behavior. But after Darwin, after evolutionary theory, after the unseating, after secularism, after all of these things took place, those same sentiments and tradition of eliminating diversity became completely unhinged, to the point where now genocide is part of the logic of nationalism. You cannot have other ethnicities in the nation, really, right? Even if you have a mythological ethnicity, such as Americanness, right? They're the foreigner. Italy's for the Italians, France is for the
alien.
French, America's for the Americans, India's for the Indians. If you have anybody else, they are a threat to the political unity and to the political entity, and they must be eliminated, either subjugated or whatever else. This is the type of worldview that makes it possible to come up with a tool of destruction such as the nuclear weapon, probably the most inhumane thing, one of the most inhumane things human beings have ever done. That the idea that all of the scientists who worked on it, it was just a job, it's just progress, it's just this, it's just that were kept in the dark and uncoordinated. This would not be possible within a Christian, even within a Christian framework of like saying, how is this pleasing to God? How is this moral? How is this in accordance with the teachings of Jesus or any other religious framework? But the fact that it was then secularized and just materialistic, that the materialistic concerns within the society paired with that tradition of just eliminating threats, which is not the only tradition of Christianity at all or Christian Europe, but was the dominant one, that this led us down a very, very dark path, which is why, and this is the significance, probably the last point, this is the burden of Muslims in the world today. The burden of Muslims in the world today, especially in the Western countries, is to demonstrate that there is another way to live, that you can accommodate and give respect to real differences in a non-tokenizing and a non-DEI fashion, that you can actually live with deep differences in a way that gives honor and dignity to people's cultures and their religions and their ethnicities and what else. And you can organize politics around different principles than a simple ethno-nation state model, which is predicated upon the homogenization of the population within that territory and violence towards others that would potentially challenge it. I believe that Muslims, we have to teach this to other people. That we've been getting, look at the heyday of Christian scholarship was in Muslim lands in times when Islam was dominant. The heyday of Jewish scholarship was in Muslim lands in times when Islam was dominant. That we need to demonstrate to others, especially the people of the Western nations today, how Islam teaches you to balance between these things and how to appreciate and enjoy the diversity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created on earth in a way that is dignified for everybody and does not detract from their safety or security at all.
Allahu Akbar. Jazakumullah khair. Ending on an empowering note there. We could talk for hours, but I'm conscious of time.
My apologies.
It's like almost 1 a.m. It's almost 1 a.m. Here as well. Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Tom Facchine, for joining us. I hope to see you soon, inshallah. And Jazakumullah khairan to you at home for watching as well. I hope to see you all soon in the next episode. If you like this podcast, as usual, give it a like and a share, and let us know in the comments below your thoughts. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.